Some real interesting Red Sox news today that I think a lot of people are going to want to debate. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Red Sea Radio. My name is Corbin, and thank you very much for clicking on this video. And hey, look at this. We got some actual Red Sox news to talk about. A little bit rare in this period of time, but we do got a couple of things we got to talk about today. One of them, a little bit interesting, not really crazy debatable, just something I wanted to keep you guys aware of. And the other one I think is definitely something people are going to want to debate. So let's start with the smaller news item and work our way towards the bigger one. And that is that the Red Sox did lose a couple of their depth pieces to the free agent market this past week. The first one being Nick Burdi, who recently elected free agency, which I have to say I found myself a little bit sad about. Not like, oh my God, what are the Red Sox going to do without Nick Burdi type of sad, but just sort of like, man, he was a pretty good depth piece for this Red Sox team. His season this year was just plagued by injury, especially at the major league level. He only got 5 1/3 innings, but it was 5 1/3 scoreless innings, and at the minor league level, he had just a 2.83 ERA across 35 innings. Felt like Nick Burdi was the exact kind of depth piece a team could use over the course of a 162-game season, right? Felt like that kind of guy who could step into not a super high leverage role, right? If Chapman goes down, you're not being like, okay, Nick Burdi, your time to shine, right? But just sort of that, kind of middle relief, sort of maybe lower leverage to medium leverage type reliever. He felt like he could do a pretty good job at. Now, just because he elected free agency doesn't mean he's not going to be back with the Red Sox in 2025. It just simply means he is now free to sign with any of the 30 teams as opposed to just staying in the Red Sox system. But not the only guy to elect free agency recently, so let's talk about the other one as well. The other guy the Red Sox lost recently to free agency is Abraham Toro, and this one doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, he was solid for a second there this season, right? And then he just sort of fell off a cliff. Ended the year playing 77 games with the Red Sox, which feels like a lot, doesn't it? But during that time span, he rocked a 239 average, a 289 on base percentage, and a 371 slug for an 83 OPS plus, about 17% below league average production. His last 35 games, he hit just 185 with a 237 on base percentage and a 269 slug for just a 506 OPS though. So it felt like really half the time, right? 77 games, the last 35 of them, basically half of his season with the Sox was just kind of miserable at the plate here. I mean, I guess the Red Sox are losing some first base depth heading into the 2026 season, but I do think Breslow also made it pretty clear in his season-ending press conference that first base is going to be an area the Red Sox are going to look to improve upon coming into 2026. And even if they don't bring someone externally into this organization, which I still kind of think they do even with these guys in here, but if they don't, you still have Tristan Casas, who will most likely be back in 2026 at some point. I don't see them trading him. I just don't think the value is there. You've got Romy Gonzalez, who was pretty solid, I think, for the Red Sox for most of the year, right? I mean, he finished playing, 100 games with a 300-plus average? That's pretty valuable, especially for a guy who could play first base. And even after those guys, you've got a couple of guys who can man it in sort of worst-case scenario type situations, right? Connor Wong can play a little first base. Christian Campbell can now play a little bit of first base. Nick Sogard can play a little bit of first base, right? You now have all these options in there, and with the idea that the Red Sox are most likely at least going to be looking at potentially improving this first base situation coming into 2026. If I'm Abraham Toro, I'm also hitting the road too, right? I'm sitting there and I'm saying, oh, maybe there's a better opportunity somewhere else, somewhere where I don't have 10 people or whatever it is in front of me. And I don't think anyone's going to sit here and say, I'm going to miss Abraham Toro, or, oh my God, I can't believe the Red Sox allowed Abraham Toro to hit free agency, right? And I don't think either of these guys are really in that category of, oh my God, you can't let this guy go. But this is just sort of the kind of news we're getting at this point in the year. But it's also, I think, somewhat important to take note of as we head into the free agent market, right? Because I think there are going to be some signings, some trades this offseason that are going to be more geared towards building up that depth again. Every year we get the, oh, this is dumpster diving. Oh, this is an issue, right? No, this is what you're doing, right? You're replenishing depth when guys like this leave. This is just sort of building up to where the Red Sox need to go this offseason. So again, nothing super crazy, nothing in my opinion really debatable in this news, just simply news to keep you guys aware of what's going on with the Red Sox. However, the other portion of this video is definitely something I think is worth debating. And of course, today's sponsor is DraftKings. And they have an absolutely fantastic offer for you right now on DraftKings. New customers who sign up using code REDSEAT and bet $5. If that bet hits, get $200 in bonus bet instantly. You can then stay in the action and use your bonus bets on DraftKings single game parlays at your shot at an even bigger payout. To take advantage of this fantastic offer, all you have to do is use code REDSEAT when you're signing up. Again, fantastic offer, code REDSEAT. Thank you to DraftKings for sponsoring this episode. Please don't forget to gamble responsibly. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Let's get back to the video. The debatable news we're talking about in today's video is actually a lack of moves from the Boston Red Sox, especially when it comes to the coaching side of things. Because yesterday, after we made our video talking about, hey, there could be some changes to this Red Sox coaching staff, don't be surprised if something changes coming in at 26, Rob Bradford reported that there absolutely isn't, at least with our main coaches, I should say. Because Rob Bradford reported that hitting coach Pete Fatse, pitching coach Andrew Bailey, third base and outfield coach Kyle Hudson, first base and infield coach Jose Flores, bullpen coach Chris Holt, and bench coach Ramon Vasquez are all going to be here come the 2026 season. Those are essentially all the main guys here. The only ones really left off this list are some of the assistant hitting coaches, who I imagine will still be back in the Red Sox dugout in 26, the catching coach Peter Ginn, who I imagine is going to end up back in 2026, right? I think for the most part, the catching was really solid this season. I know there were some issues with catcher interference later in the year specifically, but I'm wondering if that had more to do with Carlos Narvaez's fatigue. You know, he ended up with that surgery at the end of the year than it did with the actual philosophy behind the catching for this Sox team. And the other one is Jason Varitek, right? The game planning / run prevention coordinator. This one we knew about. Right, we've talked about Jason Varitek in depth a bit, right? We know that Jason Varitek is on the last year of his contract this season, so he's a free agent this year. We know that there are vacancies all over the place for managers amongst Major League Baseball. I have a feeling we're going to be sort of sitting here wondering whether or not Jason Varitek's going to be back in a Red Sox uniform for a pretty decent chunk of time this offseason. So Varitek, the name to keep an eye on for the changes here, but I do think there's going to be a lot of debate amongst this. Now, there are some guys who absolutely should have been back this year, right? I think Andrew Bailey, Chris Holt, those guys, the pitching side of things, they did a really fantastic job this year. Not only did the Red Sox bullpen end up with the best bullpen ERA in the American League this season, but you saw a lot of guys take legitimate step forward, specifically in this rotation too, right? I mean, Garrett Crochet went from, a guy who hadn't really pitched a full season to one of the top 3 pitchers in Major League Baseball. Brian Bayo, for most of the year, took a legitimate step forward. Giolito, again, for most of the season, was way better than I think a lot of people were expecting him to be, and the depth on this Red Sox rotation was really impressive this year. I mean, Dobbins looked good. Fitz was a serviceable pitcher. You had Conley Early come in towards the end there. He looked great. You got Harrison, Tolley, right? Those guys all looked fairly solid, and I think overwhelmingly there's more wins in this pitching staff this season than there were losses, right? There are obvious losses here, right? I mean, Walker Buehler was a loss, Dustin May, Jordan Hicks, who you just simply couldn't fix this year, but overwhelmingly, I do think it was a pretty positive result for the pitching staff. The thing I think the Red Sox fans specifically are going to debate as to whether or not this was the right move are Kyle Hudson and hitting coach Pete Fatse. I actually should throw in Jose Flores in here because I think a lot of people are going to point to Jose Flores because the Red Sox infield defense this year had way more errors than I think should happen for a baseball team of the Red Sox caliber, right? I think honestly the infield defense and why the metrics are a little bit poor is mostly due to injury than it is to instruction to these guys, right? I mean, you lose Marcelo Meyer, he was your best infield defender. You lost Casas, who's not a great defender, but brought some stability to that first base position. You lost Alex Bregman for a long period of time. Trevor Story's just simply getting older, right? I think there were outside circumstances for Jose Flores, which is also kind of interesting when you talk about Kyle Hudson, right? Because I think a lot of people are going to sit here with that sour taste in their mouth from the wild card series with Huddy and say they can't bring this guy back. Right? Oh my God, he missed that Nate Eaton play. It could have cost the Red Sox their season, even though personally I still think the Red Sox end up losing that game at some point. But regardless, that's a big thing that Red Sox fans are debating right now. Should this one play cost this guy a job? Personally, I actually don't think so, and it's for a specific reason. Yeah, there were some moments this year that stand out as, hey, maybe he shouldn't have sent that guy, or maybe he should have sent that guy, but you always remember the bad ones. You remember the 10, 15 bad sends that he had, or holds that he had. You don't remember the, 150, 200 solid plays that he made over there as a third base coach. What I will say in defense of Huddy is I don't think people are giving him enough credit for how well he's really done with this outfield. Now, a lot of this has to do with the talent, right? Cedon's always been a really good defender. Willier's always been a really good defender. But regardless, he's transitioned those guys into really good defenders at the major league level. There's a legitimate chance here that both Wilyer Abreu and Cedon Rafaela win a Gold Glove this season. And if you take a look at defensive runs saved for the Boston Red Sox, of their top 5 players, 3 of those guys are outfielders, and every single outfielder that played a legitimate amount of innings, those are guys who are all above 0 when it comes to defensive run saves. So they are all above average defensive outfielders. And I think that's something that people aren't recognizing with Kyle Hudson that he deserves some credit for. So personally, I don't hate the idea of Kyle Hudson coming back and being with the Boston Red Sox. And honestly, I don't think you guys should really hate that idea either. Pete Fatse, on the other hand, in my opinion, is a much more debatable topic because there are positive things with Pete Fatse and this Red Sox team this season offensively. There were a lot of categories where the Red Sox were actually top 10 in average, on base percentage, slugging, and OPS. They were all a top 10 offense in baseball this season. Doubles, hits, triples, and RBIs. They were also top 10 as well. So you sit there and you say, okay, there were some positives for the Red Sox offense this season. You have to remember there were a lot of, key changes to this offense throughout the entire year. I mean, you lost Bregman for a couple of months. You trade Rafael Devers before halfway through the year. You lost Roman Anthony for a month or so in this season, right? At one point, you had 3, 4, 5 rookies in this lineup, yet you still were able to be a top 10 offense in baseball by almost every measurable metric. So you sit there and you say, okay, you know what? Maybe there's some positives here, but we also have to acknowledge what went wrong for the Red Sox offensively this year because there's a lot of that as well. You were top 10 in strikeouts this season. You were only 14th in walks, which is a big dip from where you were last season. You were towards the bottom of the league in productive outs, right? You were top 10 in the league with runners left on base this season, dead average when it came to hitting long balls this year, and these aren't incredibly new problems for the Sox either. Right, I mentioned the strikeouts being an issue for a couple of years, but, runners left on base, the strikeouts, the combination of everything has been something the Red Sox have been dealing with for the past couple of seasons. Now, again, like we talked about with Jose Flores, there are some external factors here, injuries, poor performance from players that just happens throughout a season, right? But it feels like a lot of what's been going on with the Red Sox has been their strategy or their game planning coming into these big situations, right? I mean, this year, their worst performing time was in high leverage spots. It's not something that should be happening with a team that wants to be competitive and make deep runs in the postseason, right? And that feels like not so much an issue of talent, but an issue of approach. When we're talking about this major league team and what it's going to look like going forward here, you're talking about a lot of young players, right? A lot of developing superstars in Major League Baseball. If there was any time to sit here and reevaluate how you were going to approach, different hitting situations and different approaches at the plate, this felt like the perfect time to do that. So I am a little bit kind of shocked, to be honest with you, that a majority of this Red Sox coaching staff is going to be back with this team for a little bit. A lot of it I do get, but there's some of it where you sit here and you say there wasn't anyone out there who could have been a little bit more improvement over what you're getting with some of these situations. I think specifically on the hitting side of things, right? To me, it means one of 3 things. Either the Red Sox thought this season in terms of their hitting was more of a, roster issue or injury issue, and if guys had been healthier, there wouldn't have been so much of a problem offensively, or they're sitting there saying that there's not really anyone out there that they think is going to end up being a legitimate improvement outside of marginally for the Red Sox offense. And I'm curious to, I don't know if we're ever going to get an answer to that, but I am curious to see if we ever do, right? Is Craig Breslow going to come out and say, look, yeah, Pete Fatse had his faults this year, but, the grass isn't always greener, and we don't know that there was anyone out there that was going to do a better job with this hitting staff? I don't know. Also, hitting staff, what is it, offense? I don't know. You guys understand what I'm saying here. So very curious to see if there's ever an explanation for this. I kind of doubt there's going to be, but absolutely something I think is worth debating and having a conversation about because I do think these guys have a really big impact on where the Red Sox ended up this year. However, that's just my opinion. So let me know in the comment section down below, what do you guys think? What do you think about the 2 guys leaving in free agency? Is it anything you really care about? And 2, on the bigger side of things here, what do you think about the coaches staying almost exactly the same? Right? Do you think there should have been changes? Let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, if you made it to the end of this video, do me a favor, make sure you guys have hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're new here, we talk Red Sox content almost every single day. Also, make sure you guys hit the like button on this video as well. It just simply helps out a ton, and it's the best way to let me know you're enjoying the content. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one, and I will see you in the red seats.